Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first webinar in 2021. And as you all know from the invitations that I sent and the advertising we did, we're going to talk about how aerating slurry will lead to healthier cows. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of what's been done with manure management all over the world for the last couple of decades. What are the problems and risks of that for your cows? What's like kind of the downfalls of that system, and what could be a solution in aerating slurry? What does it change, and what are the effects on your farm? I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Nela Schermeier, and I'm a veterinarian from Germany. I'm based in Wisconsin, United States now. That's where I am right now. And I work for the company AgriComfort for 2 years already. But like I said, I'm a veterinarian, so I went to vet school. And before that, I was actually a dairy farmer and did dairy farm training in Germany for 2 years. And here with me today is Reese McLaughlin from Dairy Power. And Reese, I would just ask you to introduce yourself and tell us why it's you that's talking to me today.
No, thank you, Nella, for that. So yeah, my name is Reese McLaughlin, Sales Director here at Dairy Power Slurry Management Systems. An agricultural background was where I was sort of born and bred, really, with my grandfather roots being, farming as well. So spent a lot of my teen years on farm, actively on hand. And as soon as I left school, went straight into selling, really, and being lucky enough to travel a good part of the world at this stage and to meet some fantastic farmers along the way.
That's great, Reese. Okay, I just saw in the chat that there is a question on the terminology, and I just want to pick this up. So the word slurry, Reese, you can explain probably better. That's really like a British term, right? For
British and European term, really, yes. And then if you go over to sort of the States and Canada, manure is more of the terminology over there. But slurry and manure, it's So I just wanted to bring that out of the way right away. Like dung, slurry, manure, we're really like talking about like the liquid mixed phase of like feces in urine that you would keep in a tank. That's just correct. To clear that terminology up, maybe. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, let's dive into our topic. Oh yeah, so I wanted to ask everyone kind of like, what are the manure storage systems you see? Maybe you have a farm yourself. What is what you're using on your farm? What is what your neighbors are using? If you're like in the dairy business, what is what your customers, clients are using? Just very interested to see where everybody's at right now. So it's just a little poll, should be popped up on your screen right now. Feel free to answer. It's actually multiple choice, so you can, if you're like, I have this, but all my neighbors have this, feel free to answer multiple questions. And I'm just gonna let it run for a little bit till we have most of you have chosen their options. I'm gonna share the results with you. Reese, what would you say is like you're in Wales right now, correct? In Wales, yeah. With COVID restrictions, unfortunately unable to travel. So yeah, here in the sunny part of Wales, if there is one. But no, I mean, here at the moment, we've just we've had the news of NVZs coming in. We all know in parts of Ireland, etc., that currently exists anyway. But yeah, it's a big shockwave for farmers here in the UK, having had the free reign of slurry management, really. So from what I'm seeing in the UK here at the moment, there's a lot of lined lagoons going in.
Okay.
Financially wise, for the end user, for the farmer, it does work out financially cheaper. And again, there's some good grants here in the UK for that. So if there's any UK farmers out there that are thinking about covering outdoor lagoons or floating covers, etc., feel free to send us an email and we can point you in the right direction.
Absolutely. Okay, I see most people have picked, so I'm just going to close this now and going to share the results. And I think I hope everybody can see this now. I think it's not so surprising to see that the majority of answers is a deep pit under the slatted floor. Me working on dairy farms in Germany, this is what I experienced like 100% of the time, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, I think German regulations keep you from having a lagoon. I've never seen one in Germany. I've only seen them like in the Eastern countries, like maybe in Russia. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so this is really interesting. I think this resonates quite well with what we see in most places around the world that we work in. And like you said before, there's really, maybe if we say separated manure and methane digesters, maybe a separate topic, but the top 4 answers that we got here are really systems that your system could help out with, right?
Yeah, that's great. So that again, as you said, then it all depends on what part of the world you're in.
Yeah.
You know, through the Midwest there in America, you're going to see a majority of deep pits. Reversal to that, you go to the Ukraine or Russia, you're going to see a lagoon. So it does really depend on the climate and where they're farming mainly as well. But no, that was sort of pretty much what I was expecting back.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk about it. So as we saw, a lot of people answered that the deep pit kind of is a classic, or is what they're seeing, or then the lagoons. And I would call that the classic manure storage. So the manure piles up in the barn, it's either been scraped out or goes through the slats, and then it's just been put into one kind of like container of some sorts, and it's stored there till its time is coming to go into the lands. So what's happening there is with that manure just like going in, and we said before, it's a mixture of feces and urine. So it has like a certain dry matter content. Dairy farms will be different from like beef farms and stuff like that. But what they all have in common, it's like a liquid with dry matter kind of like floating in it. And if you have it sitting for a while, it will settle, meaning that it will separate into the kind of like solid parts floating on the top and the liquid settling on the bottom. And this like floating part will form a hard crust. Anybody who's been on a dairy farm, I'm not telling any news, everybody knows this, and this is a very common picture that I'm showing here. But the problem with this is that we see those like plaques here and those little like gaps in between it, because it's still, the crust will seal the liquid phase and make the liquid underneath, because there's no oxygen exchange between the air and the liquid phase anymore. There will be a buildup of dangerous gases from the anaerobic bacteria living in the manure, breaking apart the urea from the urine mostly, and building up gases like methane and ammonia, and they will kind of conglomerate, accumulate under the crust. And when then those like cracks happen and it pops open, those gases kind of erupt in a big bubble all of a sudden, and they are very toxic. And as we can also see, this is a problem if we want to put this out on the fields. And again, any farmer knows this, we can't pump this. If we put a pump in it, we would just suck out the liquid phase from underneath and the solids would stay, but we want it all to go out, and we want it all to go through the pumps into the tank and not create a problem at any point. So we need to agitate it before we can actually spread it. And that usually happens with a tractor with a mechanical agitator attached to it that's like lowered down into the tank, it swirls it around, and just before pumping. And again, in that moment, the crust breaks open. All of that like accumulated gas in that moment is coming out. So we have a lot of like a high concentration of those toxic gases that were kind of trapped under the crust coming out in that moment of agitation. And what's the problem with that? Because we saw the top answer, it is the deep pitted or the deep pits under the slatted floor. The usual situation is the cows are actually living here right over that stored manure and right over that area where the bubbles of high amounts of toxic gases are erupting. And that can be very dangerous for the cows. Also, there needs to be somebody who's operating that tractor and that mechanical agitator. So somebody, human, farmer, that is right there when those bubbles erupt and are there. So it's a very tricky, dangerous situation that nobody really loves doing, because I think I'm gonna go into stories like that, but we hear it in farm news and on newspaper all the time, that there is actually lethal accidents happening. And the other aspect of it is what the noxious gases that that are evaporating then into the environment, it's kind of a double loss, because it's an emission, it's a greenhouse gas. We don't want it to be in the air and in the environment. It's what gives agriculture also a very bad reputation. We heard about it a lot, that beef farming creates so much methane and it's really bad for the environment. But the other fact is also, we don't want it in the air, we want it in the ground, because it's actually very good for our plants, it's food for our plants. It's a fertilizer we want, and it doesn't help us at all if it's gassing out of the tank and just poofing away, literally. And we want it in the slurry. We want it then to bring it into the soil to be available for our plants. So double bad, kind of. I need to move us around a little bit here. Sorry for that. So the consequences of this kind of classic manure storage is that it's stressful for the cows with the gases that are coming out of the slurry during mechanical agitation. In some cases, it's even so bad we have to move them out of the barn, out of their comfortable environment, away from their feed, because maybe we have to put them in a little pasture or something like that, so they're not eating the feed that they're supposed to eat. The other part is that it's, like I said before, it's very risky for farmers and livestock, and it can actually lead to lethal accidents of livestock, or even worse, people dying. And it increases our costs in artificial fertilizer, because, like I said before, we're losing that ammonium. When we look at this cycle here of this very reduced version of a nutrient cycle in a farm. So we have nutrients from the forage that go into the cow, it's fermented in the rumen and all of that. She poops it out again. And then we put this manure back onto the fields, and we kind of want to recycle them the whole time. And the only really thing that should be going out should be the milk. But what's really happening is that a lot of that nitrogen that we were putting into that cow is airing out, poofing out of the tank, literally, and it's leaving the cycle, and we have to put it back as fertilizer here, and that costs a lot of money. And all of that leads to overall reduction in soil and forest quality, because this is way better fertilizer. It's not only cheaper, but it's also better for the soil and the plants, because it has more organically available nutrients in it than any fertilizer that you could buy. So all of that is kind of the consequence of that classic manure storage system. And we thought about it a lot, and this is why I brought Reese into it today to talk about what he thinks dairy power can bring to us with their solution.
So yeah, I mean, back in the early 90s, John O'Donovan, the founder of Dairy Power, and his son Pat started to develop an aeration system. And back until, wasn't even, what was it, say 10 years ago, until the dairy campus took hold of the product, Dairy Power was selling the system as an air agitator to save the dangers of agitating. And, Dairy Power didn't know what was actually happening to the slurry. It was only since then we've done many, many data trials to see that, yes, we are reducing ammonia and giving better air quality. We are increasing ammonia nitrogen within the slurry. And these would play big effects on the return on investment on the product. So, once installing the aeration system, it takes all the labor out of any agitation. There's no planning, there's nothing. The safety aspect of it as well. I mean, you go and speak to a farmer himself, and And he'd say, oh, we're seeing savings on fertilizer, we've got better P&K. And you then turn to the slurry contractor, and I'll ask, I'd often ask the question, what benefits do you see? And he said, for us, it's safety. You can go into a robotic milking barn, fully slatted building, or a deep beef barn with 500 or 2,000 head. And as from the moment it comes out the back of that animal to the moment they apply it on the land, there is no contact with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was to me, I've watched the system closely for many years, and when I first came across it, I was sort of mind blown, to be honest, of the thought that that they're driving air through slurry, but reducing the ammonia above the ground. And that does take some thinking, but it's unbelievable when you go into a piggery or a dairy barn and you're standing there yourself and you can physically see the bubbles underneath you, if you want to call it that, and very little ammonia.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's just like started as like a continuous mechanical or like continuous agitation of the manure, and it ended up as so much more. So can you explain me what it would look like if you put it into a farm? What is it that actually goes into the farm?
We've got basically a pump unit that drives a certain amount of volume of air through the pipework, as you can now see on your screen here. So we've got UPVC pipework on the ground, and each line has 1 minute of air. If you've got 12 lines in your tank, or 24 lines, it's 12 or 24 minutes to sequentially aerate your system. Now, depending if you're a beef farmer, a dairy farmer, or a hog farmer, these times will alter. We've also got 4 different types of aeration systems. We've got one for each industry: the dairy, the hog, and the human waste industries. So again, when people, often we speak to beef farmers, and we all know that, the harder the diets and the beef, the more solids that comes out the back of it. But when John and Pat went at this in the 90s, it was on their home farm on a beef unit that they trialed this out on, and worked away, and it was only a few years after that even they started in the dairy industry. So we're very lucky now. We've done a lot of data. We're 20 plus years down the road in this, and we've got 4 systems that work very, very, very well in any climate as well.
Yeah, and this is, like you said, this is kind of the system that goes in. So this is a control box, right? And then this is the rotary valve where it like goes to the different parts of the pipework on the ground of the tank. And then this would be in an outdoor tank, and this is an example of how it is installed in the indoor tank.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right. Yeah. So we've got our patented rotary valves. Again, each line has a minute of air from the pump unit.
Yeah.
And as you can see on the ground, then we've got what we would call our outlet valves. And depending on the operation, is depending on how many of these outlet valves are on the ground to drive the right amount of air through the manure or the slurry to have that breakdown and to keep it in a liquid state 360.
Yeah. One question that pops into my mind when I see those pictures here is those are all like very clean pits, obviously newly built, like that's a state they're never going to reach again. But it's not exclusive to new builds, right? You can also retrofit old barns.
For sure. I mean, the biggest thing that we would say to a farmer is it's down to the farmer to clean the tank out. Is it, it's not the easiest of operations. There's some facilities where, beef or dairy, they're in 365. That is very, very difficult. Again, in Ireland, you see, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they were building slatted tanks well before any part of the world was. So even now in our Irish sales, a majority of that would be retrofitting. But we had a fantastic example there up in Galway just before Christmas, where the farmer had actually brought in a contractor, which was in the human waste industry, to get out that reminder 4 to 6 inches. And within a few hours, the boys went in to install, and it was like installing in a new tank. So yeah, it can be done. We do conduct it, but again, it's about the safety aspects there as well. You start breaking up dry matter on the ground, you've got to be very, very careful when you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just good to know that it's not just limited to new builds, because I think a lot of people have farms that are perfectly running well and would be interested in putting this in
sure.
without necessarily building a new barn.
There's one question that comes up, and I just want to mention it there, is when we're standing at exhibitions or even on a normal day-to-day sales call is, so the system is working all the time, and it's not. The system runs for a set amount of time per day. And it's not running for 24 hours a day. Again, depending on what you're farming, and the size of the building is the time that it's running. And going back to the ammonia and air quality, as you can see in that other picture there, you're talking there could be 600 to 800 outlet valves, but we're only ever aerating a set section of the tank at one point. So that's how we're keeping everything down and then being able to drive that volume of air through.
Okay, I see. It's great. It's good to know. Yeah, and then you talked already about it, how it started out as just an agitation, but it turned out to be so much more. And there's studies that were conducted by the Dairy Campus, as you mentioned before, and also some internal research. And it turned out it's not just no need for agitation and less dangerous or no dangerous gases, but it also the data shows that there's actually an increase in nitrogen value, and that this nitrogen is also more available for the plants later on. And as this graph is showing, that we have significant increases in this, and that is that's very powerful, because that doesn't just mean that you have better slurry. You can use less of it, and you can technically use it on a bigger patch of land. You buy less fertilizer, so you get a better regrowth rate because it's more organically available. It actually helps build the soil level, the humus layer that your plants can draw nutrients from, and leads to more palatable feed. It's I can just imagine that John and Pat were drawn away when they all found this, and we're like, what? We're we tried to do an agitation system. This is what we created? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it would be. And again, go for regrowth rates, etc. From the personal experience that I've seen, and I like obviously any customer that buys, you go and revisit them and catch up and keep in close contact. And it was only a couple of months ago, we had a farm, one of the first farmers in Wales to actually install the system around 9 years back. We called down to see him, and the results that farm has seen is unbelievable. They'd had a private slurry company in to do some slurry testing and some soil testing. And on the east side of the farm, he's got quite a large tank with our aeration system in, and has been applying aerated slurry for the last 9 years. On the west side of the farm, he has an outdoor lagoon that he agitates manually with a tractor. And you can clearly see the regrowth difference in grass and the quality in P and K in the soil from aerated slurry being applied for the last 9 years to just conventional, mechanically driven slurry out of the land. And it's being able to apply that nutrient value, being able to apply that on the land when the plant needs it.
Yeah.
You're not having 3 or 4 minutes of really good slurry, and the next minute you're just hauling water.
Yeah,
the tractor can't keep up with you that's in the pit, or the sixth.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is not proven yet. I feel like it's a very new technique. There's still, or relatively new technique, and there's still a lot of studies that needs to be done, and real data that need soil biology is interesting. It takes years to build up, and it's hard to really grasp what's happening there. But I think there's going to be a lot of interesting studies that are about to be conducted about what's exactly happening inside the soil with the microbia there. How are they metabolizing everything? I know a big topic is phosphor. I mean, this is not magic. We're not sucking something out of the slurry. There's still going to be a high phosphor content in your slurry, and that's what it is. But just think about the logic of it. If there's nitrogen is usually the limiting factor because the plants need most of it. And if you have more in it and it's more available, you need overall less cubic meters of slurry that you put out per hectare of grassland, for example, which will also automatically reduce the amount of other nutrients that you put out. And over the time will also reduce that content in your soil. And you said it before that farmers did their own soil testing, and there was just differences in all the nutrients, not only the nitrogen.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And one thing about nitrogen is that we found with farmers is, you know, year 1 and year 2 and year 3, you can see that they're buying less and less nitrogen fertilizer. When they're coming into year 5, 6, and 7, the amount of nitrogen fertilizer they're buying is almost nothing. You know, that is a huge factor for aeration system.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and we talked about it before. I mean, AgriComfort is all about cows, and we're talking now a lot about like the kind of benefit of like from an economical standpoint on the farm, but it really, everything profits from it, including the cows. So if we say we have a better grass regrowth over the years, I also think, and it's more palatable, so we have an increase in like in how much forage we can harvest from our fields, and also in the quality of the forage that we can harvest from our fields. That is huge. A cow is a ruminant. It's not a pig or a chicken where it's just simply a question of how good of grain quality and how much grain you're buying to feed them. It's really about the forage that you're growing on your farm. That is the base of a cow's nutrition, and that is the base of how well she's doing and how much milk yield she's having. And as a veterinarian, I can just assure you, there's a lot like related to the quality and amount of forage you feed your cow every day. And if you can go get your growth rates to increase from the same fields you had before and make it better, always do it. Like there should be nothing that holds you back from it, because that is going to be so huge for your cows. And now when we look at these 2 cycles, like this is the kind of like classic storage that I was talking before. You saw this picture before. So we have a lot of like ammonia loss here out of the manure. So we have normal, let's call it just normal grass growth, because that's what everybody was experiencing over the last couple of decades. And if we aerate the slurry, we will have a more continuous spread out over time, low amounts of ammonia concentration that's leaving the manure, but also overall less and more biological available nitrogen going into the soil, making for better grass growth. That was actually also found in a study. And that all helps. Like this cycle it's kind of like a spiral that goes up from here on, because you're improving one part of it, you're improving all of it. And Reese, I always like to ask my guest speakers here to talk about their real life experience, about what their customers experience on their farms. And you told me this story pretty much in the beginning after we met, and I thought it was very impressive. So please tell me what this farmer experienced.
The reason I chose that we chose Cowan Hill Farm there in Lancashire is Frank and his family have been farming there for generations, on slats, farming around the 2,000 head mark. And you know, slurry has been an uphill struggle, and still is and was until we installed the system there. And Frank went ahead and bought this there last year, and he rang me himself when they were extracting for the first time, and just was blown away by how he could reverse in the tanker and just extract. Before this, he was having to take the animals out of the building, lift up slats to make sure there's enough air, add water, spend a day agitating. You know, but at this time, these animals are out on the field, so they're losing live daily weight gain. Every day they're out, they're losing. And you know, both myself and Frank worked it out. But from the time they were taking the animals off the slats, doing the agitation, taking out the slurry, bringing the cattle back in, it was almost a 7-day circle.
Mm-hmm.
To get those animals then back to the daily weight gains to when they came off was another 3 to 4 days.
Yeah,
So almost 10 working days from the time that they were taking out the slurry to the time that animal was coming back to where it was before it left.
Yeah,
and you know, it was quite a shallow pit there, and they've extracted, I think, 3 times now. And even the contractor has said, you know, it's a system that is very simple, but it
mm-hmm.
works very, very effectively. You know, and
yeah,
again, it's a great example to use because dairy farmers, beef farmers will look at a dairy farm and say, oh, you've got much more water in there, or if aeration in a robot building, oh, there's loads of water coming from the robot and it's much easier. But again, as I mentioned previously, we have the different systems to suit the different animals.
Yeah.
So yeah, and again, he's seen better regrowth rates, and where he's actually situated, his land is all around him, and you could see just by the color quality of the slurry. He actually had photographs on his phone of patchy slurry from a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just one uniform color. So no, he was a very, very happy farmer, and as he said, he's actually completed the second tank there now as well, which is great. But for him personally, it was safety. He was petrified of the dangers of agitation. That's why the animals were going out. And the ease of labor and planning. If those guys want to take out 5 loads on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock because they finished their chores, they can. You just hook up and go. And that's that's a big thing to say about a beef tank, or a dairy tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a dairy farmer will understand this. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not bad just because they're not dying from something. So maybe a dairy farmer wouldn't be like, hey, I don't have to move my cows out when I'm like agitating, but maybe they should, because it's still a lot of noxious gases in the barn that, like, just because they don't tip over dead doesn't mean it doesn't harm them. A dairy cow is should be in production a lot longer than a beef cow and ever is. And all of those gases are going to go into the lungs, going to hurt the lungs. Anybody who listened to my webinars before knows that I'm emphasizing on this very much. Lungs don't grow back. Lung tissue doesn't grow back. Once it's harmed by noxious gases, it's only the body's only going to repair it and make it scar tissue. It's not going to regenerate it. So that's that. And if we can help that situation, make it stressless for the cow by having less of these gases in, or even preventing those moving cycles, it's going to be very, very good for the overall health of your dairy cows and your beef cows, for that matter. Yeah. And when we first started working together, your point was like, hey, Nela, you need to go onto a farm. And you found me a farm relatively close to where I was traveling at that moment. It was in the Netherlands, and in like kind of the northeast of the Netherlands, Overijssel. It's a farm called the Disselhof. I don't speak Dutch, it's probably wrong what I just said there. It was a very nice farmer, and he installed the system, I think 3 or 4 years ago, if I remember that correctly. And he built a new add-on to his barn. And the old part of the barn kept this classic system, and then he built a new pit with the aeration system in it. So he has 2 systems completely separate from each other. One is aerated, one is not aerated, and he's actually putting parts of his manure, so the aerated manure, on one special part of his farm, like on designated fields, and the other classic manure on other fields, and that for, let's say, 3 years by now. And he told me that his, obviously not peer-reviewed data, but that his personal experience was that he has a 15% more forage harvest from the fields that were fertilized with the aerated manure. And he was so happy, but he's like, yeah, now we level it out differently, so those fields will get less in the next years, and we kind of put a little bit more in the other fields to even out the scores, and then we think we can even sell some of the manure in later days. He was just very, very happy with it, and was like, I asked him if it was a decision that he would do again if he would build another barn, or if he would even recommend it, and he was like, yes, absolutely, hands down. So that was when my first experience on a farm with the system, and it was that, and I was like, okay, so it really works. Yeah, so like I said before, I feel like we talked a lot about
what is the return on investment? What is like, how does this help reduce your fertilizer costs and all? But it all comes back to the cows on a dairy farm, especially it's the producing unit of your cow. Those are the animals you want to keep healthy. And this is what we wanted to focus on in this webinar. And just as a take-home message, I think aerating manure leads to healthier cows. Definitely it's a yes, by providing a stress-free environment with less toxic gases in the barn, better forage quality, and an overall safer environment for the animals. But there's also a lot of added benefits. And if we look at that little nutrient cycle, I also feel like that could also be like a farm cycle, like happy farmer, happy cow, profitable farm, happy farmer, happy cow. It all is a big system. It's almost like an ecosystem where everything like belongs together. So I think if that peace of mind for the farmer, where he doesn't have to plan out time to mechanically agitate his tank and like have the headache of the risk that comes with it for his animals and himself, that helps a lot. It helps saving fuel and labor in the agitating, which is hard on the machines. They need the agitator and all of that. It's not like that was for free before. So all of that, yes, it is a hustle to install it. We're not going to minimize that. But once you've done it, it's done. And that was all you have to worry about from that point on. Okay, well, Reese, I feel like we already have a lot of questions. So let's go into the stuff that the people really want to know about. Okay, so you just kind of go along and pick what you want to answer in which order. Just be aware there are also quite a few questions in the chat section.
Okay, 2 seconds there now. There's lots of questions coming in. My computer's catching up. It's I'm stuck on my side here, Nelly. It's
okay. You're stuck. Okay. Well, well, there are quite a few questions about like how to retrofit a tank. Like, do you need to actually take the cows out? You were already saying that's a problem for dairy farms that have them in every day of the year. What is kind of your experience with that? Can you run us through the retrofitting process? I think that answers quite a bunch of questions already.
Yeah, we'll go back. It's a question that we get every day. You know, it's a very common question that we would be asked. Retrofitting, if you're going to install it, the first day is always the best. It's the easiest for the install crew and et cetera, et cetera. But if you've already got a slanted barn, yes, we can retrofit. It does just come around to a bit of planning. And as I mentioned about the Galway farmer there are other options by going in with a bobcat yourself or with diggers. You can bring in third parties that can help. That was a real eye-opener even for us to see what that gentleman did in the space of 4 hours with the cleanliness of that tank. The only thing that I personally would stress on is the safety behind it. You know, you can't see it and you can't smell it. So, you know, when our fitting crew would go into any retrofit, we would be wearing, you know, gas detectors, just as a safety element, really. So, I mean, again, if you guys have got any questions or you think that this system could be a benefit to you and you're already farming dairy, even robotically, or you're farming beef, you know, send us an email and some pictures and let's see. Are you turning out? You know, are you doing like a bed and breakfast scenario where there's a 2 or 3 week window where you're extracting the slurry? You know, there could be time, but again, when you're retrofitting, it just comes down to the planning. If you plan it right, it can run very, very smoothly, very, very smoothly. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. We have one chat comment here from our friend Aris from Spain, and he said it could have really been done in like 1.5 days with like good planning. I worked on dairy farms before. I understand that 1.5 days is a long period of having the cow somewhere else, and it is by any means not simple. But like you said before, everything can be planned and be accorded for, and then from their point on, there's a lot less hustle with everything going on. So farmers are, my opinion, farmers are one of the like ingenious people around the world. They find a problem, or they can't find a problem that they can find a fix for it. Yeah, it can be done. Okay, there was another question on if it can be done with any kind of bedding. And I know we've run into this before too. So what's your stand on that? Like organic bedding versus like sand bedding?
Yeah, so any sort of sawdust bedding, or that's no issue at all. And with sand, we're currently running trials on sand bedding. Again, as every farmer here would know, there's many different variants of sand, and before that comes anywhere near the commercial market, we need to know ourselves that there's going to be no issues for the end user on that. But any sort of mattress bedding, any dry matter bedding, sawdust, anything like that, absolutely no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's another question here that I've just picked out. Does the system aerate 24 hours a day? We did touch on it very early on in the webinar, but it's a very, very common question. The simple answer is no, it doesn't. Depending on how big your operation is, to depending on what type of farm you are, typically the system would run between 2 and 4 and 4 and 6 hours a day. That depending if you're in the hog industry, the dairy, or the beef industry. And these are run at set times, because here in the UK and Ireland, we have cheaper electricity rates at night. So of course you run it at night, and so just little things like that. But again, feel free to, my direct email address is on the next or the second slide after this one. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out on an email. We've got some fantastic videos and explainer videos on the system, and if you have any questions, just fire them at us, really. Yeah,
absolutely. Here's another question. I think came earlier on. We kind of talked about it. It's about, do we like kind of blow out the noxious gases, or like how do we actually do that? My understanding from it is that because you put in actual oxygen and you break up, first of all, you break up the barrier between the outside air and the liquid phase, but you also bring in air that contains oxygen and that like then bubbles through the slurry. You change the whole like oxygen level of the manure that's in your tank, which will promote a completely different biome. So completely different kind of like family of bacteria living down there. And the more anaerobia you have, so bacteria that like the kind of environment without oxygen, they produce a lot of gases themselves. So they metabolize the nutrients that are in the manure into something that's in a gas state, and that then traps under the crust and leaves. But the bacteria that actually operate with the oxygen present also use that oxygen in their metabolic processes, and they make more soluble and solid states of metabolites that then stay inside the slurry, because it can't go anywhere as long as it's not in a gas state. So that is kind of the answer there. We're not just agitating, we're actually biologically changing what's happening in the tank. Yeah, and there's a question on, have we seen any improvements in animal health? Is there any data on that? What can you say about that?
As in data to animal health itself? No, it's something that we're actually currently conducting at the moment. It's something that, again, as I mentioned, until the dairy campus there came to us and we started running these trials, is when we figured out that what we were doing with the slurry. So we're moving on to that stages now, and I can say personally that the results that we are seeing is very good. And of course, as you said, you can't repair lungs, and that's that's a big thing.
Okay. I think you can see the questions now. Maybe you just pick out what you...
So we've got one here. If you have a number of tanks on a farm, can they be serviced by one pumping unit? And how far away can the pumping system be from the tank? I presume that question is around the pump that we're driving the air from into the lines. And the answer is yes. We'd have many farms all over the world where there could be 100, 200 foot differences in buildings. So you'd have your pump unit, and you'd be running your feed lines then either in a ducting underground or above ground to the next tank. And that will, sequentially aerate the same as the other tank as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is a very smart question about, like, when you empty the tank, do you need to leave like a little layer of manure so the pipework is always covered, or can you empty it out completely?
We would always say to leave a little bit at the bottom, but of course, farmers want to get their slurry out on the land, and if it's good value slurry, they want to make the most of it. So there's most of the cases it's extracted to the bottom. And you start it over again
then. Here's a question about the lifespan. So where's your stand on that? Like, how long does a system like this work and live?
So again, we go back to the 90s. The first ever farm that John and Pat sold, I visited myself, and I believe there's a few people on this webinar that have been there as well. And that system is still in working order today, still aerating slurry with little to no service costs. Once a year, you have your annual service, and that's it. And that's over 20 years old and still in very good working condition. We'd have hundreds of systems at 15 plus years old and still working away with no issues.
What we're seeing here.
I can see here, what is the estimated time to install a 500 head beef farm? So again, if it's a new build, relatively, it's more straightforward than retrofitting. I know we've touched on it already, but again, it's down to your local dealer and how many men you put on the job. But you need to be allowing sort of 4 to 5 day install time on that between work coming out of the tank and the wiring of the control panels, etc., etc.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's more a manpower question, and that there are really steps in it that require like curing or something like that. So if you put more people in it, if you have a dairy farm that needs to be done in one day, it's a question of how many people do it.
That's it. It's hands on deck and away you go. Yeah.
I understand that. Okay. Yeah. So there's a question about. Yeah. No, go ahead.
The same person is actually asked, how are the pipes held down to the floor? That's a very, very good question. So we use stainless steel, basically clips that are drilled into the ground. And as you can see from the previous slide, I think it was slide 4, how many of these clips are actually in. We, in over 20 years of selling aeration, have never been back into a tank to replace pipework. That is the crucial part upon installation, whether it's a new build or an existing building. The installation, as simple as it may sound, drilling a stainless steel pipe into the ground with a cover, it's very important.
Yeah, and I think along with that question is like, how do you solve this problem with lined lagoons?
So with lined lagoons, whoever does your lagoon lining, it's called basically rubber vulcanizing or rubber welding. The same way as they would join the liner together is we put straps over the pipework and basically weld rubber vulcanized both sides of the strap to hold the pipework in place.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe we can do one more. Let's look in the chat too. Oh yeah, there's a question about silage. If something like that gets into the system, I guess a big plus on this point is that we don't really use mechanical agitation. So it's not a problem that the silage is like getting wrapped in something and like actually destroying a pump or a mixer or something like that. Question whether or not it's breaking down is probably how much time you give that bacteria to work on it. So I would say generally, yes, it's breaking it down, but
if it's a big ball of like very compacted silage, that will take a long time. And I think there's no straight answer to that other than it won't create a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm a little conscious of the time here, and I think most of the questions are answered. Let's just kind of say that we're super happy with all the questions, and that's what is our job. Like, we like to go on farms, show our boots on the ground, and you gave me this cool map of where in the world it is that you all have dealers, and I actually think I'm covering some part up here a little bit. Yeah, so it's really all over. Like,
yeah, we'd have a very, very strong dealer network throughout Europe, and there'd be many dealers on our website, as you can see, and that's the image from the website, that have been dealers with Dairy Power for 20 plus years, you know.
Yeah.
As you can see, the Midwest there and Canada is expanding very quickly, which is great to see. And you know, what excites me is we have a solution to offer the dairy farmer, the hog farmer, and the beef farmer. And it is an issue out there. You know, there's you know, tractor agitation and planning, etc. It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we have a solution to that. And on the back of that, we also can provide better quality slurry that you, the farmer, can apply to the land when you want to. You know, instead of having to think, oh well, you know, the contractors are coming on Thursday, today is Monday, we're going to have to start agitating tomorrow, we're going to have to start pumping water in. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And of course, the more animals you have, the bigger the operation and the bigger the headache is for the end user. So
yeah.
No, that's what really excites us. We've got a fantastic dealer network. You know, they'd be classed as the Dairy Power family at this stage. And now we look forward to working alongside them even closer this year and as the years go by, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm on the American continent right now, you're in Europe. We really cover the phone like for a long period during the day with that. And we're happy to take your calls, emails, whatever, and come out to your farms and just see what we can do for you. There were quite a few questions about like estimates like that. How much would it cost for this and this? The best thing is somebody comes out and we look at pictures first, and somebody comes out and we look at the site and decide what would be the best thing that goes in, because there is no system like the other. So it's not like 500 cows will cost you X by that. It really depends on how the tank is set up and the farm generally works, I would say.
You know, we'll run through those steps before we complete. Really, is, you know, if you're thinking, yeah, you know, maybe today has been a good help to me, maybe this system can benefit me and my animals. You know, as I said, our email address is there, the contact number, links to our website, and feel free to reach out. We've got some fantastic dealers. We've got the AgriComfort team as well with us that are situated all over the world. That do provide boots on the ground and help our dealers as well. If you've got a PDF drawing or even a hand drawing, send it on a WhatsApp, send it on an email, and within 1 or 2 days, you'd have something back regarding pricing, and we can work on from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to thank everyone to join us today. I just want to give a quick look out. I mentioned it before the webinar started, so maybe some of you already heard it. So we invented from AgriComfort, we kind of like put stages to each step of the life of a cow. We call it the 7 stages of cow. Maybe you have seen this graphic already. We're spreading the word. And to do so, this year is going to be, the webinar series is going to be focusing on those 7 stages. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Reese again in the more kind of like blue part of the graphic here, because first we're going to focus on the calves. We're going to start in the life of a cow when she's just born, and the newborn baby calf that needs the colostrum from her own mom, all the way up till she's grown up, a producing dairy cow and having a baby of her own and being that mom. So the full cycle, basically. And in about 6 weeks, we're going to talk about that newborn phase. So watch out for the emails that I'm sending out and sign up to that webinar too if you're interested. So yeah, here we are. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Reese.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and I'd just like to say a quick thank you to everybody that has joined us today. I hope that that this last hour was a benefit to you. And again, if you think the solution that we have to offer is a solution that can help you and benefit you, then please get in touch. We're all here to help, and we look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you very soon.
Absolutely. So feel free to use any of the contacts mentioned below to get in touch with us. It's also always an opportunity to simply reply to the emails that I've sent you around this webinar. We've got your contact information now that you're registered and everything. So we get back to you if you need our help, no problem. Okay, well, thanks everyone, and see you in 6 weeks.
Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.